Indtil vi ikke mere var i stand til et skænderi, der hver sårbar plet lå blottet som en nerve i en tand, hvor det at skilles kun var alt for let. Nu er han gået, og et nederlag er fuldbragt og forseglet og gemt ned. Og alle stjerner synker mod en dag, der venter mig med ubrudt ensomhed. Jeg savner ingenting, men denne nat begræder jeg, at der er intet savn. Jeg er en bolig,
Hello and welcome everyone to our panel discussion on the Copenhagen Trilogy by Tove Ditlevsen. I'm Bruce Bro with the National Foundation for Danish America. NFDA is happy to be one of the sponsors of this event. I'd like to thank two other fantastic sponsors who helped make this event possible. The Scan Design Foundation of Seattle and the Northwest Danish Association, also of Seattle. The moderator of today's panel discussion is Åsa Bolju. Åsa has a degree in comparative literature from the University of California, Berkeley. Åsa is an avid reader and book club participant. She's also been involved in 3 book clubs, one of which is in her native Danish. She will be joined today by several panelists who will share their impressions of this great Danish literary work. We would like to invite everyone to participate by asking questions of the panel. Please enter your questions in either the chat or the Q&A tabs at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I will read them, as many of the questions as I can, as time allows, to the panel at the end of the discussion. So now it is my great pleasure to introduce Åsa Bolju.
Thank you, Bruce, and welcome to all the panelists. I hope you can start your videos so that everybody can see your faces. Most of the panelists are friends and family, and several of which with whom I share either a Danish or an English book club. I will introduce the panelists and then ask each of them to talk and give their impressions of the book, the Copenhagen Trilogy. Rather, of course, as the name implies, 3 books. The author, Tove Irma Margit Ditlevsen, wrote the first 2 books, Childhood and Youth, in 1967, and the third, Dependency, in 1971. The recent release of the combined books by Farah Strauss in 2019 has created what the Paris Review has called Tove Fever. We are delighted to share with you why we are all excited to have read this remarkably relevant today masterpiece of autofiction. To help avoid saying her entire name every time we mention her, you may hear Tove Ditlevsen referred to as Tove or TD. And I will go ahead now and introduce our panelists, and I'll simply do it in the order of the alphabet by their first name. So the first panelist is Ove Larsen, and there he is. Yeah, you can see Ove. Ove is a musician who lives, plays, and works in Portland. He has taught himself Danish and is a member of the Danish Book Club in Portland. We have another panelist who begins with A. He is Danish and lives with Lotte, who is representing Asmund at the moment.
Yes.
We were under the impression of 9 hours time difference. It
Yeah.
turned out that on PDT, it's only 8 hours.
Hi, Åsa.
Hi, Lotte.
But he's on his way. Yeah.
Okay, very
Yes.
good. We look forward to having him.
Yeah.
And if I can just say a word about Asmund, he is one of the 3 Danish panelists, and he's the only one who lives in Denmark. He lives in Copenhagen, and he has a unique perception, I would say, of Tove Ditlevsen, because he's lived in Denmark throughout her career and her writing time. So he has a unique perception of the ups and downs of her popularity, certainly in Denmark, which we don't have since so few of her books have been translated. I also want to introduce my friend Bodil Møller. Bodil has taught languages in Denmark and parts of the USA. She lives in Hillsboro, Oregon, and is a member of the same Danish book club that both Ove and I also belong to. Christine Beaulieu currently lives in Bellingham, Washington. She's an ultimate player whose Frisbee team has created a book club instead of playing during the past year. She's also my beloved daughter. Thanks for being here, Christine. And Karen Nielsen. Karen Nielsen lives in Portland now, but she has worked in Denmark and studied there as well in the folk high schools. Is that right, Karen? All right, got that right. She studied advanced Danish with me last year when we read Kai Munk's play Ordet, and she has been a book club member for over 30 years. Kim is Danish. He was born in Denmark, and he has lived on 4 continents. He's now settled on the northwest coast. He's a regular tournament soccer player and an avid bluebird skier. He's also my partner in life, so thanks for being here, Kim. Molly is a dear friend. She's a business owner who lives in Portland, and Molly and I are both members of, I believe, the oldest women's book club in Portland. And last but not least is Peter Wendell. Now, where are you, Peter? There you are. Thank you for waving. Peter lived in Denmark as a child when his father was a visiting professor of mathematics at Aarhus University. He now lives in Portland, and I would say you have continued your appreciation of all things Danish, as well as maintaining the Danish language. We've had a lot of fun with that. It's on to the book club itself, and I'm going to invite Bodil to be the very first one to give us her impressions of this marvelous book, the Copenhagen Trilogy. Over to you, Bodil.
Thank you very much, Åsa. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, fine. I must admit that it was a little strange to read Tove Ditlevsen in English, but once I got started, I enjoyed it thoroughly. I really think that the book is fascinating and it's full of beautiful memoirs. I think Tove has a deep understanding of how traumatic childhood can be. She gives a vivid impression of her working class childhood environment. It seems gray and often cruel and rough. She feels that she doesn't really belong there. Girls are expected to marry and have children when they're 18 or before, and many get pregnant, but Tove does not want that. Tove doesn't want a traditional female role. She wants to write. She wants to very badly to be published. And she's ambitious as opposed to all the other children. Her mother thinks that the very best for her would be to marry a skilled worker who doesn't drink and is reliable and brings home his paycheck. But this is not what Tove wants. Her mother is not close to Tove. And I think Tove, for the rest of her life, misses a closeness. She seems to be enjoying very much to be supported and being taken care of. And her choice of husbands shows that too. Tove has to leave school when she's 14, although she would very much like to stay. She has jobs first as a maid and then as a clerk. And what she wants is to write. She writes in the evening and she wants to be published. She finally finds a small magazine, Wild Wheat, that will publish one of her poems. And the publisher, whom she gets to know and later marries, actually, although he's older than her mother, he sees to it that the first collection of her poems, Pigesind, is published. Now, the third part, dependency. It is the Danish title is gift, and gift means two different things in Danish. It means married and it means poison. Of course, it refers to traditional marriage, but also to her being married to her writing. And the poison is, of course, her dependency, which happens fairly soon on Demerol and then also methadone. She has a very strong urge to write, and everything is centered around that. She, when she marries, Victor is his name, the publisher, she doesn't mind that they have separate bedrooms. She just wants to peace and quiet to write, and then she wants to be taken care of. Later on, she meets a doctor. She goes through 4 marriages, various love affairs, and a couple of abortions. But I think it's noticeable that although Tove was ashamed when she was a young person, well, actually most of her life, that she had the wrong background. She didn't have education. She was not well dressed. She did not live in a nice place. But the author Tove is not ashamed of any of her life's decisions. She makes no excuses for her bad decisions. And her style is brief, very honest, and matter of fact. It seems that she fills every page with facts and events. And I think the book gives a very vivid impression of life in the shady side of Copenhagen in the 1930s to 1970s.
A lot, Woody. Sounded like you got a lot out of the book.
I really enjoyed it. Yeah, very much so.
I want to welcome Asmund, who made it back. And Asmund, I've already introduced you, so you're well known to everybody. I apologize for not being on top of PDT and the time difference with Denmark. But it's nice It's nice that you made it here. And when I turned the mic over to speakers, I forgot to mention one thing that impressed me a lot before I turned the microphone to Molly. It's that the very first sentence in the trilogy reads, "In the morning, there was always hope."
There was
There
always
was
what?
there was always hope.
Oh,
Yeah. So on that note, Molly, was there always hope?
Well, something kept her going, right?
Yeah, for sure.
um, I found it a very melancholy read, I have to say. And I like the dark. It wasn't the most melancholy book I've read. I'd have to give that prize to a book called Notes from a Crocodile by a young Japanese woman who incidentally also took her life. So
Wow.
there's antecedents for these things. I would like to address a couple of themes, if you can have themes to a life. Certainly in this book, there are themes to me, and that is the pull between striving to live as a writer and society's and the family's insistence that she live as a wife and a mother. And this sort of boils down to, in a sense, the struggle, I would say, and the pull between her life and her mother's life. After Aunt Rosalia, or I don't know, Rosalia or Rosalia, I don't know how you say it, Danish, but after she dies, Tove, how do you say it? Is it Tove?
Tove.
Tove.
Tove. Yeah, or just
Tove.
TT if that's more comfortable.
Yeah, Tove sort of feels sorry for her mom. She sees her mom as a little bit lost and grieving, if you will, and she wants to kiss her. But she doesn't just say that would be really difficult or it would be awkward. She says it would be impossible. It's an interesting choice of words. And she says, we sit close to each other, but there are miles between our hands, which really says a lot about their relationship, because they still, they do visit each other, and they seem, there seem to be moments when they have the potential to be close, but they are not. I think at the opening of the book, the picture on the wall is very symbolic. On the wall hangs a picture of a woman looking out her window, waiting for her sailor husband to come home from the sea, which common. I'm not nothing unusual about that, except that the baby cradle is behind the woman. The baby isn't in the arms of the woman longing at the window. The cradle is behind her. So she's longing and hoping for the man to fulfill her, come home and fulfill her, but she is not fulfilled by the baby. On that particular creature, she turns her back. And later, when Tove first lays eyes on Victor, that's way at the end, she immediately drops the children's hands and goes to Victor. It's a subtle, a lot of these things are just there. You just like little moments. But the fact that she wrote them is symbolic. It means something. In the end, I mean, she kind of became her mother in a sense. So they were both restless, unsettled, not content with their station in life, not content in their marriages or multiple marriages, and not very attentive to their children, and very self-focused. I mean, You know, writing a poem about a dead baby at 16 is pretty unusual, you have to say. You know, that certainly signals something coming up. But yet, Tove did refuse to lead a dreary life, and she did this by jumping from marriage to marriage and by holding fast to her writing, both of which were intended to save her from her mother's dreary life. There's also, for me, there's kind of a sub-theme of, she observes some, as she's looking out her own window, she observes the people walking with their dogs, and she talks about the master and the dogs. Some dogs are on a short leash and they just don't lead good dog lives at all. Then there are those on the longer leashes, and they get to wander around, going from side to side. They get to sniff at things, and they seem to have, to Tove, a nicer life, and she thinks that's what she wants. She wants a master, and she wants to be on a long leash. So there's sort of this constant seeking of a master, and the masters she finds, of course, are mostly men, not all, but mostly men. And these men she sees as being able to guide her, to protect her, and to take her to somewhere. We have Mr. Krogh, who was the old, well, I don't know if he was a book antiquarian or whatever. She first meets him and hopes that she can latch up with him. Of course, Vigo, is it Vigo? Vigo F? Mm-hmm. Vigo F, and strongly Carl, her husband. And the faces, especially the male faces, are carefully observed, I would say. And they're often, if you remember, large, and they're definitely significant. So she describes them, the deep furrows in their face, buggy eyes, crooked teeth, of course. I think that's Carl, I'm not sure. No, yeah. The shape of the mouth, the Vigo's rounded head. It's like she's pulled irresistibly into them, and these faces will do something to her or for her. In fact, in one of the reviews I read, apparently her great book, I think it's the only other thing published in English, called The Faces, and that's another kind of horror story in which faces are very significant, faces of young women, actually. Mm-hmm. But how can she square this urge to marry and to imprint on men with her urge to fulfill happiness in writing? Vigo F is that master. He rewards her with publishing her poems and with marrying her. But marriage is a really short leash. And if I just can read quickly a passage where she describes her marriage to Vigo. I wave to him, and when I turn away from the window, I completely forget about him until he shows up again. I take a shower, look in the mirror, and think to myself, I am only 20 years old. Oh. And that feels like I've been married to him for a generation. It feels like life beyond these green rooms is rushing by for other people, as if to the sound of kettle drums and tom-toms. Meanwhile, I am only 20 years old, and the days descend on me unnoticeably like dust. Wow. Each one just like the rest. So marriage is a very short leash, which translates to an inherent loss of freedom. She finally finds the true master in Demerol, but the leash is almost non-existent. She relinquishes all control, even control over her writing. And in a sense, she can't get out of get at those, the exciting odors that the dog sniffs that are the source, that would be the source of her inspiration. She can't in throughout this book, she cannot find that perfect leash, which would be the leash that would let her find both her master and to also find herself.
Right. Thanks a lot, Molly. That is very, very perceptive. And I want to remind all the panelists to listen to each other as you each tell your story, and save your questions for the open period that we will have after everybody has had a chance to speak their first impressions. All right, I'd like to move to Owe. And Owe, it's going to be my delight to listen to you in English. I hardly ever hear you talk about books in English, because Owe has practically mastered the Danish language and usually talks in Danish about books. So Owe, here you are.
Thank you, Åsa. I actually did read all of these in Danish first, but my first exposure to Tove was through Anne Linnet, and not the album that we played at the beginning. I have that too, but it was Barndommens Gade. So I've been aware of Tove for at least 30 years. And of course, saw the movie, so I had imagery to go with all of this. And I think at the time I assumed that was actually her life's tale, but it was more autofiction, as I guess we're using that term now. And I don't want to go too much on the whole Anne Linnet thing, but I am. So that's what drew me into her in the first place. And that is worth a whole other panel like this to explore that relationship. So early in Anna's career, she was married to another musician much older than her. Sound familiar? And her first album actually was of Tove Ditlevsen, and she had been in contact with Tove, and what they were, it was just such an exciting thing for her. And then the suicide happened just weeks before the album came out.
Wow.
And so we can't help but wonder, what would that part of her career have been like had she not committed suicide? Because with a musician all of a sudden setting her poetry to music, that could have been a whole new wave of her career. I had a hard time putting down this book in English, even though I had already read all of it in Danish. I have her Some of the Dicte. In fact, the poem To My Dead Child, I actually read in a performance a year and a half ago, where I was asked to do a poem about death. And I chose that one, again, thinking it was autobiographical. And I'm reminded of her brother saying that everything she wrote was a lie. And that was before that poem by a few years, several years. And so, but as a writer, she was a writer before she knew what that was. So I think she spent a lot of her life trying to figure out how to be and exist as what she actually was. It's the same with any artist, actually, especially one who grows up in poverty, where the values are more blue collar, so to speak. But she was a writer. She really couldn't help it. At one point, the writing became like a drug, but just not as good of a drug for her as Demerol. That was clearly the stronger pull for her for a while. But I just, even in English, I just could not put the book down.
I love hearing that, Owe. That's really wonderful.
Yeah, even though, and I didn't experience her work as a Dane, despite my name on the screen. I'm born here in Portland and self-taught in Danish, as you said, but I feel a very strong connection with her, maybe not so much as Anne Linnet, but still very strong. I find her very relatable, despite the fact I haven't gone through the drugs and all of that.
Well,
but I hope later, if there's time, we can talk a little bit about Anna Linnet as well, and that relationship between them. Anna did not
I don't really
inherit.
think we should spend a lot of time on Anna Linnet. Oh, we
Okay.
only have an hour today.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
save your enthusiasm, please, because I love it.
Yeah.
But what I was really touched by, and what I think is quite relevant to our discussion today, is when you said she was a writer before she knew what that was.
Yes.
When her head is filled, those are words that are searching to come out. I appreciate that a lot. I'm going to turn the microphone to Peter. And would you tell your story, Peter?
Yes, I was at home one day minding my own business when I got a call from Osa, who said, Peter, you have to read this book. First, she didn't explain why right away. And she described the book to me. And as it turned out that she had this panel and she wanted me to participate. And I was very hesitant because this book is 370 pages long and I'm a slow reader. And then to prove it, I took a photo of this stack of books that I have in my little reading room next door here. And I sent it to her. And she said to me, Peter, buy the book, read the first 10 or 15 sentences. You won't be able to put it down. I said, okay. So I bought the book and she was right. I received the book on a Friday and I finished it on Tuesday. So that's, for being a slow reader, that's really fast for me. So, but I totally agree with, the comments I think have been very insightful that I've heard. And I'm in a way thinking, God, I wish I'd thought of that. That's really insightful. But a few things really stood out for me. One is that, her childhood, she describes as being sharp and hard. She sort of looks at her childhood as if it's sort of outside of herself and she's trying to escape this. But she's sort of lived it's a suffocating kind of life. She's in this little apartment with her parents, finds very little love in her life there. In fact, she thinks that her mother doesn't like her at all. Her father occasionally comes to her defense, but even he says to her when she expresses the desire to become a poet, oh, come on, girls aren't poets. You're going to make a good maid or something. You'll get a job someplace and get married. So I found it's very like I think someone said it was dark and melancholy. Yes, I think it was. Let's see here. So she also had, while she was home there, this idea of the absence of love and her relationship with her mother, especially. At one point, her mother is talking about her own father, who is an alcoholic. And her mother says to her that things were a lot better for us when he finally pulled himself together and hanged himself. And that was really pretty shocking, and to hear that as a child too. Oh, well, I guess maybe there isn't love or something. So she was, I think, desperate to escape. And then in escaping, even she really wanted a room of her own, and she finally escapes. I think she's 18, and she finally gets her own apartment. She has a typewriter. Oh, good, yay! But then it's some sort of Nazi landlord who complains about her clacking away on the typewriter. She also, in looking for a man, she finds Piet, who seems to be a really nice guy, and doesn't she think that he might be it?
Are you talking about Piet Hein?
Yeah.
Okay.
But then isn't he the one who had serial relationships, but she thinks that this is the one. And I think she's even warned about that. Maybe Ruth or someone warned her about this.
Well, until she hears about the similar letters that they all get, I think she does think that.
Yeah. But she has the rug pulled out from under her again. And so, it struck me that her relationships with men, it was almost dystopian. Where is a good man? Like Molly said, you know, she gets into these relationships and starts looking at these men, and you know, she's sort of like not very interested in them at all. When she left Ebba, I mean, it was like, I got Carl. Who's Ebba? You know, remember when she
wasn't that mostly the Demerol speaking? Do you think?
Yeah. She's like, I love you. Will you stay with me forever?
Remember that last night when she was lying in Ebbe's arms, she wished she could be honest with him. She wrote.
Yes.
Tell him that she didn't love Carl, but she loved the Demerol. Peter, thanks a lot. I'm going to have to move on.
Okay.
But I really, really like that you read the book and you enjoyed it, seems like. And I thank you. Thank you, dear friend. And next, Kim, thank you so much. I think just from proximity, you ended up reading and I think even enjoying the book. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. I hope you can hear me. I had problems sometimes with my microphone. As Peter, I was not forced to read the book, but I was told to read the book, which is different. And, of course, during the COVID, you should have had time to read books, but honestly, I read magazines and papers and done so much. I never had time to read the book during the whole year of COVID. So I was glad to get this book here, and I did read it actually a little bit faster than you, Peter, I think in 2.5 days, but it was really intriguing, I must say. I really had, you know, I left Denmark when I was about 55 years ago, just before Tove came out with Barndom, the first part of the book. So I never really got into the Tovenism while I was in Denmark. Been around the world, but of course I have read her poems and actually been playing the records as also talked. I've lent it to people because I thought she was fantastic as a poet, more as a poet than perhaps a writer. But to read this book in English was really interesting. I thought the translation was fantastic. I did have one problem. One of the first poems I read, and she actually quoted in the book, is the famous, it's the first 4 lines of the famous poem, Det evige træ, or what people in English call the internal triangle. And in the book it reads, and I will quote it because it's not near as good translated as what she says in Danish, but that's about the only place in the book where I had some problems with it. In my life, there are 2 men who cross my path instantaneously. The one man is the man I love, and the other man loves me. That is good, but the way she wrote it, and I'm sorry if you don't understand the Danish, just listen to the way it somehow rhymes and the sense to it. Der 2 mænd i verden, der bestandig krydser min vej. Den ene ham, jeg elsker, den anden elsker mig. And each sentence starts with der, den. So somehow it reads like it, I don't know, it's a setup, and it's really fascinating. But that was the only thing in the book which I thought was not that well translated.
Pretty good.
But I think, you know, reading, I've never seen a person being able to write one sentence where most authors would use at least 1 page to describe what she's saying. I mean, I caught the first one I fell over was with Scarby Hans and Pretty Lily. I paid 1 kroner, which is about 20 cents, to take the kids on a tour of Copenhagen in their wagon. I don't know whether it's a car or whether it's a horse-drawn wagon, but on the route, they just dumped Tove on the roadside, and that's it. There's no explanation why they dump her. Does she ever get picked up? How does she get home? She doesn't elaborate, but it's just, it opens you say, what in the heck happened there, and what did she do? But that's the way she writes, and I found that very, very intriguing.
And I think sometimes, Kim, we forget that this novel is new in terms of publication here, but it is set during the gay 20s, and then the depression of the 30s, and then the 40s. So it is a totally different world that is described, but the translator, especially the one of dependency, which is new, is actually going to appear on an event that takes place 4 days from now. It's called Meet the Author through the National Nordic Museum in Seattle. And some of you might enjoy that as well. I don't think you were finished, Kim.
No, I put out certain notes which you write there, which sort of struck me as being really so well written and open for discussion. She says about her father, I'm not offended of my father's criticism because he was always wanted to protect me from disappointment. The father was this guy who, the only thing he said to Tove was basically when he came home, he patted on her head and said, hey, hey. And then the mother interrupted and told him not to get close to the child. So she didn't have a relationship with her mother. She tried to get a relationship with her father, but she was never allowed to have that relationship. And that was, to me, again, really a fantastic way of writing it somehow. And it keeps on going, these small statements she makes during the book there, which you say, she could have written a whole book about it. So I love the book, and although as I say, I've been traveling for 55 years around the world, I'm glad to be back to read Tove again. And some of the points I had written, other people already covered. So let the next panelist come with his suggestions and what they think about the book. I loved it.
Oh, thanks a lot, Kim. I was just delighted at watching your enjoyment. And I'd like to turn to Karen, because I know that you also read some Tove Ditlevsen, I believe, in Denmark. And now you've finished or read the book in English. What's your impression, Karen?
Yes. Well, you know, when I started taking notes, and I'm famous for putting sticky notes in a book, I thought, oh, I hope we can get together again, us in Portland anyway, and talk about so much that we won't get to talk about today.
Nice.
But, and I also like to get some images. When I think back on a book, what image comes to my mind? And they are kind of odd images, I have to say. About her first husband, Viggo, I want to read this image because it's, yeah, it's a little upsetting to me. She feels glad when there's something cheerful in the newspaper because like the day people said you could buy alcohol again after the occupying forces had forbidden that for a week. I feel glad when he, Viggo F, smiles at me with his single tooth, cuts my hand, says goodbye, and leaves. He doesn't want false teeth because he says that in his family, men die at 56. And that's only 3 years away. So he doesn't want to pay for these false teeth. Well, life expectancy in men at that time was 58. So he hasn't got that much life left on average anyway. But I thought this man who published this book and supported young artists, he only had one tooth that just didn't fit my image at all. So that was one of the images. The other image is about Carl. And, you know, when she met Carl, he you know, it was at a party. And so the thing that she remembers about him, she says, good God, he has an underbite and 64 teeth in his mouth instead of 32. So Carl is a very odd looking person. And she says she don't know what should I do, you know, with this man who's very odd looking. But she does enjoy Viggo F's shower so much, you know, that she overlooks his single tooth and ends up marrying him in the interest of her publishing ambition, because that's her ticket there. And then Carl, of course, he had the drugs to offer. And she's so brutally honest about exactly why she fell for him or went with him. And likewise, I think he was pretty sick in his interest in her.
What about her Van Gogh moment? I mean, she sacrifices an ear, basically.
Oh, yeah. Well, like I said, there's so much to talk about.
Yeah, right. That's true.
But then when she's, as a child, we've been talking about that in her psyche, you know, she writes about how she was so odd. And I started thinking, well, wait a minute, how is she odd? You know, and as she writes, she says she was moved to tears by such small things. Yeah. That other kids would tease her about this. Her brother told her that she was ugly. She couldn't sing. She was abnormal in not being attracted to Erling. She can barely tolerate people by her own words. And Axel's mom tells her she's not ordinary at all because she feels she can support herself. And young girls didn't usually feel like that. She, about herself, says, I'm different because I write poetry. I'm very ignorant. I lack sophistication. I'm too colloquial, and I only read dead authors.
Couldn't finish the French Revolution.
That's right.
Karen, thank you so much. We're going to have to move on just because we're limited by time. But let's meet again. And I'm going to turn to our last two speakers. And Asmund, I know that you have a special view that you're presenting today, and I look forward to hearing it. And thanks for making it back so quickly.
Yes, unmute himself. There we go.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
First of all, pardon for being late. And then, thank you for the invitation. And I would look forward to come to Portland to discuss a little more. Would be very nice. But first of all, it was so beautiful to have the opportunity to read the book because I never read them. And they made quite an impression. For a Dane, they have a beautiful Danish. They have a very good contempt, but I found something else that actually did hit me, and I would like to argue a little for that by my reading, rather idiosyncratic. The books were written as a self-therapy in '67, and this was a staging of a childhood and a youth to create some sort of meaning in the present. And she recreated a past, and I found that very strong, not as something fixed, but as a force field of tensions. And among the tensions in her childhood, I especially noticed longing for love and security versus creation and change, observer versus participant, belonging versus outsider, and dream versus reality. And there are more and important tensions, and they were weakening each other or enhancing each other and proliferating into new tensions. And the narrative to me of the youth is a narrative of transformation and crystallization. Observation skills and extroversion matures. She's still longing for love and belonging, but it is tinted with a cynical instrumentalism. The individual self of her finds its form and becomes the center of some sort of significant otherness. And she sees writing as different from everything else. It is catharsis. It is the modality of her life, her very existence, and it has to be pursued without clemency. And the crystallization in itself produced new tensions and new modes of coping. And to me,
carried you forward. The books carried you forward with the tension. It went from childhood to youth to dependency. The tensions continued.
Yes, they do, but they transform, they transmute, they differ very much on the way. And to me, dependency is the ultimate crystallization of tensions. And the crucial tension, the crucial dependency to me concerns creation and writing. The other two are superficial, where the inherent restlessness begs to be processed. And the reward for her is in the process itself. After a flow of creation follows new emptiness, new restlessness, not tranquility, but movement, transformation, and new, next, more and more, pure dependency. And the only thing that actually made her stop with the drugs were the books she had not yet written, neither a husband nor children. life is a creation, and creative life is to her not being, it is becoming all the time. And becoming is the surrender to a merciless restlessness. And that is what hits me in my life and my surroundings right now. Today, creation and becoming is the ideal. Movies, self-help books. It's the theme of middle-class dinners. It's forming a CV and even a, let's say, dating profile. Become a unique individual. Create yourself as a piece of art. That is the motto. For TD, the tension between belonging and outsider is then transmuted into belonging through her very individual otherness. And in that sense, I find that she was quite unique in Denmark at her time.
Yeah.
So making your life into a piece of art, however small, demands two qualities, to my opinion, that TD, Tove, really had in excess: subjective sensitivity and the objectivity of distance all the time. For TD, for Tove, subjective sensitivity seemed to be a basic precondition. It was significant in her presence and in her writing, but also during her life developed into some sort of instrumental cynicism. However, in order to instrumentalize sensitivity, one has to step away from the phenomenon. One has to observe, and she was an observer. And the development towards instrumentalism opens for self-observation and self-reflection, and it gets priority. TD's observations, they were transformed into poetry, as that was her way of reflecting. And the legacy that really hits me is the tension between presence in observation and absence in reflection, which is inherent in our present quest for individuality and the life of becoming. Create your life. Otherwise, you're a carrot or a vegetable. And reflect unremittingly. Otherwise, you're not. Oh, are you present? No, maybe not. Damn if you do. Damn if you don't. Individuality, reflection, and creativity, to me, is the trinity of life in the 21st century. And in this perspective, to me, Tove is a forerunner for what seems to be a generally recognized precondition for a rich individual life. And what she does is she makes her cynical unmasking of the inherent tensions, the destructive effects, and the general costs. And that is, to me, like salt in an open mind. And I think that was pretty well done by Tove so many years ago. And if you don't believe me, if you think I'm exaggerating, just find a job ad or a dating profile, or consider the demand for individuality and outstanding otherness needed in order today just to belong. That was what I had.
Thank you, Esmond. You certainly belong. And I thank you for that.
You mean I'm so much other?
No, what I'm surprised by is I just think it's been wonderful that we have 8 panelists, and sometimes I wonder, how can we be reading the same book? But that's what's so magnificent about a book club. And I'm delighted to finish with our last panelist, Christine. And I know that you also were able to finish the book, Christine. So over to you, dear.
Yes, hello everyone. This was my first introduction to Tove Ditlevsen. I haven't read any true Danish literature before, so this is very exciting. And even though I was reading it in English, I enjoyed getting a little bit more familiar with Tove and looking up some of her poems in Danish, etc., and getting more of a feel for her. I enjoyed the book overall. I found it tragic, as Molly introduced it. And I found the figure of Tove, her character, as she recreates herself, tragic as well. But I really enjoyed how the writing style, and again, it's a little hard. I did not read this book in Danish itself, so it's a little hard to know how much of it is the translation and how much of it was Tove's original style, but she's very subtly poetic and has these short, very straightforward, clear sentences that, as Kim said, still kind of leave you wondering, like, wait, what happened? Because she just hits you really hard with this fact. And yet the way she presents these facts lend themselves really well in the childhood. Her tone is very much of a child, just accepting the world as it's presented to her. Like if an adult tells her a fact, she's like, oh yes, and this is how it is. And the way she writes very much accepts or mimics that sense of experiencing the world as a child as this external, being handed to you, being defined by others for you. But then I also thought that it also lent itself extremely well to the last chapter, Dependency, where she's never truly explaining why or her internal thought process about why she does something. And this lends itself perfect to an addict who usually doesn't have reasons for why they do something, they're compelled. And so again, this negative descriptions that she uses about herself, I feel like she doesn't usually give us her internal monologue or reasonings for things. She describes the world as others reacting to her. So we only find out about what she's done once we see someone's reaction to her. So she's kind of described in this negative space sense. And that works both really well in the childhood where your world is being defined by others, but also in the chapter on addiction where you're not really in control of things anyway. So I find her fascinating, and the struggle, these dualities, tensions, as Asmund's talking about, between wanting to belong and yet having this extremely strong, immutable core that she has from the very beginning, or at least presents herself as having from even in her childhood, where she has always known and never gives up on the dream of being a writer. Like she just knows that that is what she will be somehow, even though when she doesn't know how it'll be possible. And I have a quick quote from this because I love sharing the actual writing from the book. She's talking about her first friend, female friend, one of her masters, I would say Molly, her maybe one female master, or I guess Nina also is later on. But she's so excited to have this one friend. She thinks this friend is perfect and she's willing to do anything to get her approval, including going along with her schemes to steal things, etc. So throughout the whole long friendship, I'm always afraid of revealing myself to Ruth. I'm afraid that she'll discover how I really am. I make myself into her echo because I love her and because she's the strongest. But deep inside, I am still me. And so that core of her exists from the very beginning, even as she's struggling to, because she's not really struggling to be accepted. She works on hiding herself. She has that dumb face where she glosses over her eyes and opens her mouth a little bit and pretends to be really dumb because she doesn't want people to know who she is. But I feel like most of us in this struggle of tensions that Aswin's talking about, as we are forming ourselves through childhood, we're really trying to belong. We want to be accepted. We want love. Tove wants love, but she doesn't know what it means. And rather than like truly trying to get acceptance from her peers, she just hides herself from her peers because she knows that she won't be accepted. And so anyway, that's just one of the many tragic notes that really struck or spoke to me. As for her writing, another aspect of this sort of negative space for her, it's the one way she gets any fulfillment at all. The one time she seems to experience joy is when she's productively writing, but she still just has a passive role in it. The words flow through her. She always describes it as all of a sudden they come. It's never work or it's never her creation. It's never that she's perfected something. It's always that the words have flown through her. And so anyway, she's just both this extremely intriguing character and also really frustrating for me, because she ends up living a way more independent life than most women in those days had, but she's not doing it out of her own sense of empowerment. Like, she's never empowered. She's always looking to other masters, or external approval is, you know, demolished by the one negative review that the journalist who likes her old husband Viggo F gives her. You know, she doesn't have a strong self of confidence that drives her forward. She's somehow just compelled to do it. And so even though her story is one of relative female accomplishment compared to just getting married and just having kids and just serving the wife role that was the standard role at that time, like, it's not an empowering story in the end. And so it takes on that sense of tragedy that made it a hard book, even though it was a good book.
Thank you, Christine. And I agree. One of the reviews I was reading, and Molly will relate to this, talked about what would happen if the two friends in the Neapolitan trilogy or quartet, Lena and Lilu, became real. And they said that's what reading the Copenhagen Trilogy is like. It's so raw, so real, so irrepressible.
Also, now explain, you're referring to your favorite writer, Ferrante, right?
Yeah, I can't help that.
Okay.
So you've all had so much to say that it's actually close to 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock.
11.
Sorry, 11 o'clock. But I think, Bruce, if there are any questions, we can cover those, or maybe we can take a little time for any questions between the panelists, or I can show a couple of pictures. Do you have something?
First of all, a comment back to something that Karen had said. All of us men that are over 58 years old sitting here right now are very happy to be alive. But one question would be, what, in your opinion, has made this book such an important part of Danish literature, and why is it suddenly so popular?
Does anybody want to take that on? Or looking at, personally, I would just kick it off by saying, I think it has to do with, amazing as it may sound, just marketing. Putting those three books together was a masterpiece from Farrar Straus. Getting Michael Goldman and Tina Nonnelly's translations together was also a stroke of genius. And then seeing how the themes that have been revealed here today continue from childhood to youth through dependency, how they belong together as a complete oeuvre, I think she's always been popular in Denmark, although I believe it has waxed and waned. But her book caught some kind of contemporary spirit, and it has created what they call the Tove fever. I noticed that on Amazon, the book used to be $19, and it must be popular enough because it now has gone up to, what was it, Kim?
$27.
$27. So you should have ordered the book yesterday if you don't have it, to those people who are listening. But I do
But
hope.
now support Powell's at $30 to Powell's books.
All right, that's good too.
$30.
That's good too if you can afford it. And in the meantime, I want to thank everybody for having participated. And if you have anything to add as to why you think the book has become popular, it's because it's available right now. I think it has never been available in English. So for those of you who have never met Tove, go get it.
There's also the great promoter, Åsa herself, has been promoting the book. And so that has really led to huge sales increases. And Åsa, you know, I bought my copy for $19 and something. I told my sister about it the next day, and she's listening to us speak here. She tried to get it the next day. It had already been up. It was already up to 27 or 20.
Okay, so some of us were at the right time. So
as for why why the book is so popular, I feel like, as was brought up today, it really is a vivid portrayal of the time that it was in sort of this undecorated, unfanciful, oh, here's what life was like in this area of Copenhagen. And for me, it was really touching, Mom, or related in some sense of the stories I've heard of your childhood. And I imagine that it captures a lot of people's fantasy and interest for that reason.
There could be.
Just as a time period piece.
I agree with you, Christina. Yeah.
I'm going to show you a picture to end our session. It's a picture that I think will resonate with you.
That's an elephant.
Yes, resonates very strongly.
I know that's not exactly what I had in mind. Let me see if I can bring it up here. All right, so just to give you a picture, you can see that this picture on the left was taken in 1967. The picture of Tove returning to Hedebygade, which is just around the corner from the Red District in Istedgade. You can see her sitting on this staircase that leads up to a door that if the picture was a little bit bigger, you would see this door with several windows broken. The other picture with this beautiful door and the slightly different stones at the entrance with the railings moved was taken just last week by Asmund. And Asmund, I wonder if I can call on you to tell us what has happened to this apartment house since Tove Ditlevsen's childhood. Can you hear me, Asmund?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can hear you, and I can tell you that the whole area has been gentrified. 40 square meters would cost around $800,000. And that's not exactly at Tove's time.
And also that's actually after the apartments have been enlarged. Is that not right? Most of them have been joined together to form larger apartments.
The house there is actually what you call that. It cannot be demolished.
Okay, so it's
and it is due to the style of the house, because it was speculation in 1884. And the entrepreneur would be tax-free if the flats were less than 25 square meters. Today, they are put together, apart from Tove's flat, which is still the original size.
Is it sort of a museum now? Is it kept as it was?
No, somebody lives there.
Are you able to identify the children in that photo?
Yeah.
I have no idea. I can hardly identify Tove.
Yeah. I want to show you, I want to finish our session with one more picture. You know how they say that one picture is worth 1,000 words? I think this picture hits the spot. Look, this is Tove standing in the backyard as an adult after she's moved out. She lives in a nice house now. But if I can enlarge it and get closer to her eyes, take a look at the expression on her face. And I think it says a lot.
Looking for the evening star.
Yeah, that's right. Looking for the lodestar. So I'll leave you with that photo, and I thank all of you for all the work you've done, and I thank you, Bruce, you, Alice, and Alex, and Line, and I hope to see you all in Portland for a wonderful conversation.
Including Asmund.
Yeah, including Asmund.
Of course.
Good night and good morning, everybody.
Thank you, Åsa.
Good morning.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you. Thank
Alice.
you.
Bye.
Bye.